This is a Channel 2 News special presentation. Rajneeshpuram, Paradise Lost.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Gianola. Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, easily the most controversial figure in Oregon, is in the middle of a controversy tonight that he's not controlling. It may be of his own making, but it's not to his liking. Sunday night, with $55,000 in cash, guns, boxes of jewelry, and his throne, the Bhagwan and a handful of his followers fled the ranch commune. They got as far as Charlotte, North Carolina, where U.S. Marshals arrested Rajneesh and 12 of his friends. He's charged with fleeing a federal indictment and now faces the possibility of 180 years in prison. To hear him tell it from his jail cell, he wasn't fleeing anything.
I had only this much idea that they want me to be in a safe place and ready to come back at the moment when the court wants me.
Why leave his commune?
So many threats to kill me were coming in every day, and so many people were found roaming around the mountains. So they thought it is better to take me someplace for 3-4 days.
One wonders how he could possibly be safer than in his own Oregon commune, with only one entrance, surrounded by mountains and protected by armed guards. And now he wants to come back to Oregon.
I am a fighter, and when there is fight, I am the last to fly from it. I am going to fight for American Constitution against American politicians.
His personal secretary wants Rajneesh out of the country.
Please let Bhagwan leave this country. Don't kill him here. He's done nothing wrong.
My coughing is coming back. My eczema may start any moment.
Most of all, every chance he gets, Rajneesh says he's done nothing wrong.
I cannot go to jail because I have not done anything. And if I go to jail, then America becomes Soviet Union. Then it is no more a democracy. Then America goes down the drain.
But in the federal hearing to decide if he should be let out on bail, there were allegations of assassination plots against the Oregon Attorney General and the U.S. Attorney in Portland. The Bhagwan's lawyers say he wasn't a party to those plots, and to jail him for the plots of his followers would be like jailing all Catholics because the mafia kills people.
I think the characterization of sannyasins or disciples of Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh is just a whole bunch of people following somebody blindly is totally false.
The federal magistrate in Charlotte decided the Bhagwan should be held without bail, but she dismissed the charge of attempting to flee from prosecution. How did it all come to bout? Well, we'll explore that in this next half hour, and we'll look ahead. But first, let's look back. Joining us now, Channel 2's Jim Hyde, who was the first Oregon television reporter to visit Rancho Rajneesh back in 1981.
A little more than 4 years ago, Jeff, and if you'll recall, and we will recall together tonight, Oregon's relationship with the Rajneeshis has gone from curiosity about a unique commune to fear of takeovers of the local government to accusations of attempted murder. At first, no one knew what to make of the newcomers.
How many people will live here eventually? Do you expect there will be several thousand, or?
I have no idea. As again, I will say whatever is required for the farming purposes will be brought in.
Back in September 1981, Rancho Rajneesh had a population of about 60 people, including the former owner's foreman, Bob Harvey, who agreed to stay on and help the newcomers learn how to run a ranch.
And if the gossip quits, we'll be a lot better off.
What kind of gossip have you heard?
Oh, just like submachine guns and this kind of stuff, and, you know, bodyguards around everybody. I'm the only one on the place that has a gun, and mine are so full of dust, I don't even know if they'd fire.
How many automatic weapons do you have? Do your peace officers have?
I'm not going to tell you.
The semi-automatic armaments appeared as the crowds and controversy built around Bhagwan. The first so-called World Festival in July 1982 drew an estimated 6,000 people. 1 year later, 14,000 came.
It's worth coming to see him, man.
Why? What does he do for you?
Oh, beyond all explanation. The closest thing is love, man.
It's just, you can't not do it. I mean, if he's available, you've got to come and see him.
The citizens of Antelope, the nearest town, would have liked never to see Bhagwan again. They even tried to dissolve their city charter before the Rajneesh population could outvote them. Their disincorporation plan failed. 1 month later, in May 1982, residents of Rancho Rajneesh voted to incorporate part of their land as the city of Rajneeshpuram. The legality of that new city is a question still in the courts. Meantime, the sannyasins expanded their holdings in Antelope as a hedge against future legal decisions outlawing Rajneeshpuram.
We still have to provide the things we need at the closest, most feasible place we can. And granted, Antelope will never fulfill what we need ultimately, because it will never be what we have on the ranch. It will never provide that kind of service to us. It does provide an interim situation.
The current city council is completely irresponsible.
More Oregonians began to agree with former Antelope City Councilman Don Smith when Sheila announced the Share a Home program in September 1984. So-called street people from all over the country were invited to the ranch. Others thought the homeless had been collected in order to swing the coming Wasco County election.
I know the community's intention. They're going to take the election like a snap.
But state elections officials set up special voter registration hearings. Rajneeshis and their guests boycotted them and the election. Some street people were dumped on the streets of Portland. Tensions between Rajneeshis and Oregonians were worse than ever.
One time, I tell you what Mr. Furbish did.
I'll tell you what, Sheila, you have, A, you've had your opportunity to speak. B, if you're going to use obscenities, you're going to forfeit any opportunity to speak. And C, I said that Mr. Furbish would have a final word, and he will, and if you're not quiet, we'll just cut the mic off. In that case, we'll cut the microphone off right now.
My master teaches me, if the truth antagonizes, it's perfectly okay. It is your network who has put obscenity and profanity to provoke the state of Oregon.
But it came out of your mouth.
No, it didn't come out of my mouth.
I heard it.
I'll tell it now. Your network can go and jump in a lake. Take your microphone and leave.
In the following months, Sheila began to spend more time away from Oregon, traveling to Rajneeshi centers in Europe and Australia. Finally, on September 14th, she left the ranch for good, precipitating the most startling accusations against Sheila and her gang, voiced by the guru himself.
That instead of being a meditation commune, they had turned it into a fascist concentration camp. First, they tried to kill 3 people.
For the next 6 weeks, Bhagwan and his loyalists complained loudly about the manner in which the government was investigating the attempted murder, arson, and wiretapping charges against Sheila. But when the feds finally returned some indictments, they were against him. Bhagwan boarded the next chartered Learjet out of his town, a trip that ended in jail in Charlotte, North Carolina. So, Jeff, that briefly is how we got to the present state of affairs.
Jim, you first visited the ranch back in '81. Did you ever imagine at that time that it would grow in size to its present size? And did you ever imagine that the Rajneeshis would be such a political force in Oregon?
Not the amount of controversy that's been generated. We speculated at the time how many people might eventually live there, but the things that have happened in the past 4 years, no one could have envisioned.
Okay, thanks for that report. Well, up next, the investigation of the Bhagwan and his followers has gone on for years. How did it finally lead to arrests? We'll talk with agents in charge of the Immigration and Naturalization Service and the U.S. Customs Service in a moment. Joining us now is Carl HOUSEMAN, the head of the Portland office of the Immigration and Naturalization Service, and Lawrence LaDodge, resident agent in charge of the U.S. Customs Office here in Portland. Gentlemen, thank you for being here this evening. And let me ask the first question. When did the investigation into Rajneeshpuram really begin, and why?
Investigation began approximately mid-1981, and it began as a result of a letter of complaint that was forwarded to the Attorney General of the United States, complaining about possible violations of U.S. immigration law regarding marriages.
These were things that began in India, allegations of lying on forms that were filled out in India to bring some people to this country?
Well, that came later. Actually, the original,
those words, but
yes, but the original allegation was concerning marriages that were currently taking place in the United States in order to facilitate the entry of individuals into the United States.
This was the same time you were also considering the entry of Bhagwan himself. As I recall, he came here on a short visa for medical treatment, is that correct?
That's correct. He arrived in June of 1981 on a visitor's visa for the purposes of receiving medical treatment.
And that had a termination date?
That original termination date was October of 1981, and a request for an extension of time beyond that was made and approved.
Mr. Ladodge, what was the thrust of the Customs investigation into Rancho Rajneesh?
Well, Customs has been, for almost since they arrived, we were receiving disturbing reports of sannyasins around the world, and not a lot, but consistent reports that they were being jailed as couriers, drug couriers. That's all public record. So we, as immigration became interested, we also became interested because of allegations of currency coming in, of drug smuggling, and there are people out there right now that have been involved in such violations, and so we began monitoring also, and this is something that concerned us. And those investigations are continuing.
Are there any indictments coming on residents of the ranch now for those
Not
kinds
at
of charges?
this time. We have several investigations underway involving people involved in the ranch. We just arrested a top 15 fugitive that had been out there recently. He's in Canada right now. He's a sannyasin. We arrested him the first time back in 1972 for drug smuggling, and he has drug and currency charges pending against him.
And you've linked him as a resident of the commune, at least at one
We've
time?
linked him out there at the commune, and he is awaiting extradition out of Canada right now.
Most recently, this past week, or actually longer than that, there's been surveillance on the airport at Rajneeshpuram to watch the comings and goings, and last Sunday, of course, was the going of Bhagwan himself. How did your officers maintain that surveillance? Were they physically there?
We monitored the Rancho Rajneesh airport from Portland with the assistance of the FAA towers, Seattle, Portland, Redmond. Essentially, as a result of the U.S. Attorney requesting some assistance in border watches as things progressed in the last month, and of course that culminated Sunday with the jets departing the ranch airport.
Mr. Houseman, there's some speculation that perhaps maybe Bhagwan wanted to get caught. He obviously knew that the airport out at Rancho Rajneesh was being watched very carefully. Have you heard any of that speculation?
I haven't heard any of that particular speculation. I think he obviously knew that something was happened. It seems fairly certain as a result of the court action in Charlotte earlier this week that his attorneys knew prior to his departure that he was to be named in an indictment and that arrest warrants had been issued for he and others. And so I think it became fairly common knowledge out there that the Immigration Service was about to execute warrants for their arrest.
Is that surveillance continuing, Mr. Ladodge?
We're continuing to monitor it. It's certainly not anything like it was. We haven't lost interest in the activity out there by any means.
Have you noticed a lot of people leaving the ranch, coming and going from the ranch, sannyasins? I mean, there have been a lot of press there, of course.
Well, we see activity both ways. I can't say to what degree, but there's certainly people leaving, and there's also people arriving. That's pretty constant.
Your best guess, gentlemen, at when Bhagwan will come back to Portland and have a hearing here? Essentially, it's a move that's up to the U.S. Marshal Service, and in concert with their moves throughout the United States of people that are in their custody. But my best estimate would be sometime around the middle of next week.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. Well, in a moment, how are the Rajneeshis reacting? What are they planning? And what is their future? A spokesperson from Rancho Rajneesh when we come back. With us now is ROSALIE, a spokesperson for Rajneeshpuram. Welcome.
Hello.
Let me ask you this right off the top. Why would Bhagwan leave the security of the commune? You have the mountains there, you have the one entrance, you have security guards. Why did Bhagwan leave?
Well, I can only speculate, as I knew nothing of his departure until the following day, practically, for certain. I know that to live on the ranch, it was becoming more and more of a feeling of being enclosed. Very often, for instance, in discourse, we would hear, in the morning we have discourse, and we would hear airplanes, for instance, flying overhead so low that it felt as if the roof was actually going to come off. One time it was so low, we felt we were going to be attacked. Bhagwan interrupted himself in discourse and told us all not to be worried. Then the plane came back again, and he again said, again, don't be worried. But this was the kind of atmosphere which was surrounding the community there. As isolated as we are, there was still a very strong feeling that there was an impending doom. And as I've heard, there were a tremendous amount of threats on his life. And I believe very strongly, knowing what was available for him in North Carolina, that he could have had a very beautiful rest, and probably a necessary one.
Rosalie, do you think that isolation contributes to a kind of paranoia about that kind of thing, about the threats? I'm sure that there are threats over the telephone, by letter, whatever. But is your isolation, does it make you lose contact with the rest of society?
I don't feel that way myself. I mean, living there, I feel very natural and comfortable with people who come to visit the ranch. We have a tremendous amount of visitors coming in and out of the ranch. We often leave the ranch as well. And there isn't a feeling of separation. It's even become less so since Sheila has left. Sheila, I have to say, did create a feeling of paranoia, but most of us being intelligent people and worldly people had a hard time buying that. So I don't feel a sense of paranoia.
But you have a sense of loss, or at least a sense of separation that Bhagwan is in Carolina at the moment. Can that commune continue if he is out of the country or incarcerated? Is that?
Yeah, the community can still function beautifully.
But will the spirit, will the attraction be there?
Absolutely. You see, what people misunderstand is that although we have the advantage of having Bhagwan in Rancho Rajneesh with us, there are many, many communes, as you know, Jim, all over the world that are functioning beautifully with the spirit of Bhagwan. Bhagwan is inside all of our hearts. We don't need him physically present in order to be living out his teachings. So we can function beautifully in Rancho Rajneesh without Bhagwan physically. And of course we prefer for him to be there.
Obviously.
Are there any plans by the sannyasins, or what can they do to release Bhagwan? Can they bring any pressure? Have they tried to bring any pressure on authorities to release Bhagwan?
As far as from sannyasins?
Yes.
Or the attorneys that sannyasins have hired?
Yes.
I don't really know what kind of pressure is possible. I don't understand all the political ramifications and implications. I don't think that what we're doing is trying to be tricky in any way. We feel that there has an injustice that has been done to Bhagwan, and we are all unanimously very, very concerned about that man's health. I spoke yesterday to a journalist who was there at the hearing, and he said that Bhagwan's head was shaking. He was visibly in pain. That means that his body, his health is going down very, very quickly. For that reason, we're very concerned, and I'm sure whatever the lawyers can do, they will do to help him receive bail so that we can put him into a comfortable surrounding.
The spirit of acceptance of what he has done and where he leads you continues. There is no questioning of why he's gone, no feeling of desertion.
Abandonment or desertion.
That's a question that's come up.
It comes up a lot. It came up immediately after Bhagwan left the following day, journalists coming into our office wanting to know. And I, for one, do not feel abandoned. I don't feel that Bhagwan owes me his life. I feel grateful for every moment I have with that man. And he certainly doesn't ask when I'm leaving or where I'm going and expect for me to report to him. It's mutual. It works both ways.
All right, let's see if we can't, Jeff, get to a conclusion about where we may be going next week with this question.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Well, some final thoughts and some observations when we come back. Jim, the title of this special news program, Rajneeshpuram, Paradise Lost. From what we heard here this evening, is it a lost paradise?
Still, we can't tell. A paradise, perhaps. They've worked very hard. They've spent a lot of money at Rajneeshpuram over the past 4 years to build a very pleasant place to live. The people I've met there over the past 4 years are very happy to be there, sharing the same philosophy, but also sharing the presence of the man they call their master. So if he cannot come there or chooses to go somewhere else, it's difficult to imagine all those people and all that energy remaining at Rajneeshpuram.
It's a very complex and complicated news story. I know reporters get frustrated sometimes trying to cover it. There are no easy answers.
No easy answers, and almost no way to predict what the next step is going to be. We can say, for example, that it looks like Bhagwan will be in court in Portland, federal court in Portland, sometime next week. What will happen there, what arrangements might be made for bail, if any, it's hard to say at this point.
Jim, we appreciate you sharing your insights with us this evening on a very complicated issue. We've only really just scratched the surface. Well, that's our show for tonight. Have a good evening, everybody. Channel 2's Weekend News is next. Good night.
This is KATU Portland, serving Salem, Albany, Corvallis, and the Willamette Valley.